We're Nick Lombardino and Zach Blumenfeld, co-founders of CultureCon. Welcome to a special series on the CultureCon podcast, Culture Starts Here.
This content series is brought to you in partnership with our friends at ADVISA, a Midwest-based consultancy helping CEOs, HR leaders, and managers transform workplace culture.
In each episode, ADVISA CEO Heather Haas and leadership consultant BJ McKay dive into practical ways to initiate and sustain the culture you need to drive growth and success at your organization.
The Culture Starts Here series starts now.
All right, welcome to the Culture Starts Here podcast on the CultureCon podcast. I'm BJ McKay, a leadership consultant with ADVISA, and today, as you might tell, we're going to do something just a little bit different than we typically do on our podcast with myself and Heather. So we're coming at you here today from CultureCon up here in beautiful Madison, Wisconsin, and I'm bringing with you my crew. Like, these are the people in the trenches doing the consulting work with clients like yourself at all levels of organizations, small and large, that are doing the work, the tactics, day after day, month after month, year after year, to get the results that everybody wants when they're talking about having a culture that becomes a true competitive advantage. So to get started, I want to introduce everybody, Brady Bunch style. So we usually look at each other when we move. All right. I'd like you to tell everybody your name. It'd be great how long you've been with ADVISA. Sounds great. And then what's your best takeaway from CultureCon that you've been here? Mandy, you have the mic. Why don't you kick off?
Can everyone hear me? Mandy Haskett. I'm a leadership consultant. I've been at ADVISA almost 8 years. And I think my biggest takeaway this morning was the reframe from Abigail talking about how culture is not just what leaders say, but also what people feel. And that's a lot of the work that we do.
Thanks, Mandy.
Hi, Kai Hawkins, also a leadership consultant. I've been with ADVISA for 10 years, which feels pretty unbelievable. And I think two takeaways. First, this is a team trip for us. So I've loved connecting with our team. Patrick Howe actually made us some goodie bags for the way up, which was just the most darling thing I've ever seen. And we played Esther Perel's game in the car and asked each other some very work-focused connection questions, like the nerds that we are. The other thing I really liked from Abigail this morning was just talking about the ways that you need to listen to your employee experience and the multiple ways that you need to do that to get feedback from your employees.
Thanks, Kai.
I'm Tyler Wolfkale, and I'm a client success consultant, and I've been with ADVISA for 3.5 years. And actually, Kai, what you just said about the listening to employees part really stuck out to me this morning, but a follow-on to that when Abby mentioned the idea that they listened, but then they kept listening. That like the listening is just the first part, and then you have to start responding, deciding what your plan's going to be, and you have to keep listening throughout to really get a feel for how are things going and how's it resonating with people.
Awesome. Send her back.
Hi, I am Rachel Barnhart. I'm also a leadership consultant here at ADVISA, and I'm in my second year. And for me, one of my favorite parts this morning really was the connection and seeing all of the participants. I think it's sometimes thankless work doing culture work. And so to see so many people from organizations who are hungry for this information and actively working on this in their organizations is refreshing.
Yeah, I think you pretty much just stole my.
Well, you're going to have to be original.
Goal to be a CultureCon.
Dig deep.
Patrick Howe, a leadership consultant. I've been there right about 6 years now. I would say what I like about the session so far today, what I'm seeing again, just there's so much need out there in the world for organizations. So to have this kind of event where people can come and celebrate and get new methodologies and all those kind of things has been really good. And I think that's the big thing is it's just like you have to put the work in. I think that's what's the real big takeaway is there are easy ways to improve your culture, but you got to just put the work in.
All right. So the way we're breaking this down to give you the most value is these are the folks that are out, like I shared before, doing the work, and they were primed. How prepared they are, we're about to find out, of what are the common workplace problems that they're running into. So you might be listening to this like, hey, are we screwing this up? Am I the only one hitting all these walls? What might I do about it? So we're going to break this up into basically 2 parts over the next about 30 minutes. The first part's going to be identifying the problems. What are we seeing out there? What are folks experiencing? And I'm going to dive open that in a second. And then we're going to break down a few tactics. Like, what might we do next? Or what did you do with your client? And how did that all pan out? Hopefully you'll walk away with some stories from these great folks, some opportunities to figure out where you fit, and like, are your problems truly unique, or do they fall in some of these categories that, like Patrick just shared, there are some simple things to do. We'll grade everybody afterwards, and you can get to hit the survey. I'm kidding. There'll be no survey after we're done. So let's just open the floor right now. Patrick, you can hang on to the microphone. So when you thought about like the common workplace problems, what your clients are struggling with, which ones or stories came to mind to you?
Yeah, the biggest one right now when I work with presidents, CEOs, C-suite folks is I call it be intentional about your intentions, meaning they're showing up in a lot of meetings and they might think they're showing up to be collaborative, but they make a statement that comes across like, well, that's what we're doing because the CEO said we're doing it. So I've been working with a lot of them just to say you have to be so explicit about what you mean your role to be in that meeting. So showing up to say, hey, everybody, here's my intention today is just to be a collaborator with you. I don't want it to be perceived that if I make a suggestion that that's the winning answer. I have an answer. It doesn't mean it's the answer. So we're spending a lot of time talking about that, of just being really clear to articulate what you want your role to be in that particular moment. And it's actually paying some dividends because people feel, they're more open to speak if the CEO is showing up the right way.
I have 2 questions to break that down just a little bit further. The first one is, how do you help that CEO or that leader even recognize that that's the problem? So I might be listening to this and, oh my gosh, my manager does that. Like, what are some of the things you might have done to bring that awareness about so that the work can start?
Yeah, that's usually you need a CEO or a president that is open to feedback. I do a lot of observation of them in action. So kind of walk the shop floor, go in and watch them in action in a meeting, and then we'll debrief it afterwards. We do coaching sessions where they feel like, hey, I'm not getting traction with my team. I'm just kind of wondering what's going on, and I'll have them rebuild. Give me some examples of what happened in your the last meeting you went to. And usually it uncovers itself pretty quickly. Like, I showed up and I talked about this, and somehow everybody shut down. And I say, well, let's play that back. How did you just say that to that group, and how do you think it was perceived? So usually it takes some time to just for them to be self-aware and live it through. But then they have to go actually take the action afterwards, try something different, a new behavior. And that's when they come back and they can see a different result from it.
Excellent. Thanks. You already answered my second question. I'm like, what would you see? And you'd see them shutting down. So how would I know that might be the problem? Thanks, Patrick.
Yeah.
How about you, Rachel? What are you seeing out there in the field?
I think something that comes up time and time again is really silos, just the existence of silos. But not only that, what are those specific silos and how is it impacting our work? And so when we zoom in and talk specifically about remote work and hybrid work and not feeling like a silo, people feeling like they're on an island, I think that's a theme that we see from time to time. And it's interesting to me to kind of zoom all the way back out and really talk about what's in it for them and co-create connection areas, and even asking people simple questions like, what would it take for you to feel more connected here if you might be someone who is remote or hybrid?
Excellent. So how is that bubbling up in your conversations with your clients when you're recognizing that this is a silo situation? What are you hearing from them, or what are some of the problem sets?
Sure. Absolutely. I think one of the first things that comes up is there's this communication gap between how a problem might want to be solved in one area versus another. And so that's the flag that gets raised.
All right. Thank you, Rachel. Kai, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think my example or my challenge kind of stems from that. It's not silos exactly, but somewhat similar. I've had several clients over the last, probably it's a 2-year period, that have come to me and said, I really need my people, usually it's a CEO or a leader saying, I really need my people to think strategically, to think bigger picture. We actually designed a program called Leading with an Executive Mindset, because the CEO felt that folks were really just kind of laser focused on their own department or their own team and not thinking big picture about what's best for the organization. And my initial question was, how clear is the vision of the organization? You want them to think strategically, but really, how can they think strategically if they don't know the strategy, if they don't know where the organization is going? So it became pretty clear. We designed it, we facilitated it. It became pretty clear that the vision wasn't really strong and folks didn't feel as clued in as the leaders thought. It also became clear that they called it a leadership team, but they actually weren't a leadership team. They didn't get together very often. And the executive team and the directors were supposed to be all one, but they were actually two separate teams, and the directors felt very much on the outside. So, these things you can hear certain things from the CEOs and the leaders, and then you get in there and you're like, oh, okay, now we can really see what the challenges are.
Right. Good call out. Do you have another one that you want to leave? I know you're riffing off Rachel's last one about the silos.
Yeah, that was the silo. And again, it's this thinking strategically. That's the one that keeps coming up for my clients. I have another client that asked us to design a couple of sessions around strategic thinking because folks were coming to her, a female CEO, and they were saying, great, let's talk about the marketing plan. And she was like, okay, great, let's talk about the marketing plan. And they were expecting her to just kind of start and go. She's like, no, I need you to bring me here's the challenge I've got. Here's 3 options. Here's my recommendation. Be very forward thinking. She's like, I'm not seeing people doing that. I'm not seeing them. They expect us to do it all for them. So thinking strategically and coming with solutions rather than just the challenges, that's been a big one.
Okay, so if I'm listening right now and I'm experiencing that, like I'm seeing my team, like I have to come up with all the ideas. I'm exhausted. I have decision fatigue. Like, can some of you maybe come up with some of the ideas? Are there certain people that like, it's a pretty, let's say I won't say they can't, like individual career achievement, but it's a longer journey for them to get there. And how might you help someone address that?
Absolutely. I think there are, given different levels of experience, given different personalities. I mean, that's the work we do, is understanding personality profiles. There are certainly folks that might do that more naturally. That's what learning and skill development is in the work that we do, is teaching them, like, there are skills, there are frameworks you can use, almost to like write yourself a script for those people who are more detail oriented and in the weeds, to really understand this is the expectation. It's more clear to me now, and this is what I'm supposed to be bringing, rather than just coming and throwing up all my problems all over my CEO's desk.
Well, I like that because it addresses the doing gap, where it's like I tell them, and I'm like, have you shown them? Have you given me? You talked about the vision at the higher level, but even further down, what's this line of thinking look like? Have you given them an example of a work product that when I ask that question, there's some clarity there? So I love how you pulled that out.
Totally. I think all of us believe deeply in people's ability to grow and develop skills in these areas, or else we wouldn't be doing this work. So to break it down and say, like, this is a skill, and thinking strategically, like, seems like this big, just cloudy thing up there. But it's actually like, no, we can break this down and teach skills around this.
I love it. It's unlike me when I walk in. This place is hopeless. These people are just, I'm just kidding. It's a joke. It's a joke. Development is the deal. So it's like, there's always opportunities. Thanks, Kai. Hey, Mandy. Yeah. Mandy, let's hear from you. What are the workplace problems that you're seeing that you thought of walking in today?
There are hundreds. There are so
Let's
many.
start from the top.
Yeah.
Yep.
This was actually a challenging assignment to summarize or try and synthesize them down into just the major ones. I think change is something that we're seeing everywhere at the heart of so many of the workplace problems or challenges that come our way, whether that's the hybrid workforce that you talked about. People are a little further away from the campfire, so that makes it trickier for folks to coach and mentor, and for that, natural creative alchemy to happen that, takes place when you've got people together in a space with some regularity and some intention. So I think change is a big one. And I think succession is being talked about an awful lot right now too. I'm hearing a lot of leaders express their concern or stress the importance that there's a succession plan for every leader in the organization, not just the CEO, not just even the executive team, but for every senior leader. Demographically speaking, we don't have enough people to do the work. We've got a lot of folks retiring. We've got this big hollow middle, and we don't have leaders equipped yet to step into the shoes that they need to step into. So I think folks have a sense that culture, leadership can help them, but they're not sure how. So I think to Kai's point, you talked about strategic thinking being an important skill. What are the skills? That tends to be the question that comes up the most. Leadership's a job. It's a job. It's a job. And it clicks in right next to your technical work. You still have that technical function that got you promoted and got you a boatload of people that you have to now figure out a way to get results through. And that's a job too. And that job has skills that are required. Maybe they're strategic thinking. Almost always they do include that, but not always. I think the most important work that I find myself doing lately with leaders to address those really important problems that are bubbling up, like succession and change, is defining that job. And tragically, most organizations have no idea what it means to lead or what leadership is at all. They can't name with any clarity the specific things that leaders need to be able to say and do to be effective there, to create the conditions, the culture that will enable their ability to get their goals met. They can't articulate it. And I think without that, with the absence of that, then it's impossible to do all these other things. It's impossible to close silos. It's impossible to coach. It's impossible to create performance evaluations and, measure people to anything because we don't know what the heck they need to do. It's impossible for us to take diagnostics like engagement surveys or culture surveys and make any meaning out of them because we didn't know what we were supposed to do in the first place. So we'll just fix the things that are trending red. And that's a wild waste of energy. So I think as change swirls and dynamics are complex and the hybrid environments, not worsen that complexity, but certainly exacerbate it, we have to have tools that give us clarity and direction so that we can be strategic about how people lead, how they create culture, and how we get our goals met.
So if I'm listening to this, these points about change and not seeing those blind spots that are available between how I got here and why isn't there anybody coming along with me and why aren't they doing the things? And everyone knows what leadership is. It's everyone knows what values. Here's a list of values. There's no bad ones, but no one's making choices. So I'm interested to hear just one layer deeper, Mandy, if you would, about maybe a story or a time that the aha moment happened. Because I might be listening to this. I've been beating this drum. No one's listening to me. They keep having the same meeting. They keep having the same conversation, and they're missing the whole point. What have you done to fill in that gap where that leader, that executive finally leaned into it and said, hey, I'm willing to give this a shot?
Yeah, that's a great question. We get asked that all the time. And we have a process for this. So the good news is that we do have a formal way to take people through this exercise of defining the work of a leader and diagnosing where we are now and then building a bridge to close those 2 points. The aha typically comes when folks realize that culture, that word, comes from physical science, like a medium containing nutrients for growth, our little petri dishes, right, from 7th grade science. When we think about that at work, the question becomes, well, what are you trying to grow? And for decades, I think executives have been okay just growing revenue, just growing, the bottom line. And that's what's resonated. Now with these younger generations, we were just listening this morning, 74? 74 was the magic number.
Yeah.
Percent of the workforce by the end of 2025 will be made up of Gen Z and millennials. We know that these are humans that are coming to work that want to be grown in different ways. So medium containing nutrients for growth, that's your culture. Well, what are you trying to grow? It's not enough to just grow revenue. You have to grow your humans too. And so I think the aha for a lot of executives has been oh man, oh crap, I got to do that too. How do I do that? What's that look like? And nobody did that for me, in my day. You just got to work, or leadership by bestseller. I've just been reading books and hoping that works for me. So The aha typically comes when they realize they have to grow something new for their culture to be effective, and that to do that, they have to align on what that is at the leadership level, and then they have to do it first. They have to go first.
And I like that you nail that they have to do it first, because that's like that executive vulnerability is like step one, like that awareness. I need, like, what I did to get here is not going to resonate. It's not going to connect to that next group.
Can I add something?
Yep. Follow up. Kai, go ahead.
When we talk about ahas, I think it's also an aha that part of that process is identifying those leader capabilities, and we really force them to choose just 3 to 5. And they have this list in front of them, and they're like, no, we want people to do all these things. We're like, yeah, right, absolutely you do, but we need you to focus on 3 to 5. We need you to really define that, because I've had clients who hired big, huge organizations to come in and do their leader capabilities work, and they identified 22. And it's like, you're going to give your leaders 22 things to focus on in addition to just the technical work that they're doing? No, people's brains can't do that. So 3 to 5, and it helps just bring such clarity to the conversation for all the leaders in the room.
Thanks for putting a finer point on that. Tyler, do you have any ideas? I'm just kidding. Like what let's hear your, what, when you prepared for this, what are the things that you thought over that drummed up that you're experiencing with your clients from your perspective?
Yeah, I think it ties into a lot of what we're talking about. I think the thing that first came to mind for me was just this thing where you see all these individual contributors, Mandy, you kind of alluded to it, that get elevated into these leadership roles where suddenly what I've been leaning on with my own skill set is not the whole job anymore. And now it's actually these 5, 10, however many other people who may or may not have the same skill set that I had, may or may not even go about their work the way that I do. And I'm now being measured on their output, not mine. And I think actually what you just said, Kai, about like the 22 capabilities, right? I think part of the problem is you elevate people into that space, then you give them those 22 objectives. And when they realize that they can't possibly do that, they start just asking themselves, well, why would I not just go back to doing it on my own? And it's like, I feel like that's the conversation on a leader level that is happening, because it's like, well, wait, I could make the same amount of money or even maybe more and just sit in my own spot and do my own thing instead of trying to deal with this whole team that I'm not equipped. No one's helped me to know how to lead, right? And you can see how that'd be frustrating. And so I think, yes, some of it is about simplifying for leaders, but then also it's about thinking about it from their perspective and then offering a way forward that lets them grow into the role you're asking them to play.
Excellent. Thanks, Tyler. Go, yeah, please, Rachel.
I think this ties into exactly what you're describing, Tyler, but also, Mandy, your point of it's not good enough to just grow the revenue. You have to grow the people too. And I have a client right now who's been building multiple leadership journey tracks and career pathing for their people. And they're discovering this entire nest of people who they've raised their hand and said, we want to grow here, but we have no interest in leading people. And to keep that group of people, you still have to develop them. You still have to pour into them. And that's a really important piece of that organization still having success. And so figuring out what that looks like for your organization is a new problem that I think people and organizations are facing.
Thank you for that, Rachel. And if I'm listening to this, I might be at different levels of an organization or different levels of trying to solve this problem. Like I might be a little further down the road. Hey, we have some things in place. We're starting to see some connection, but maybe I'm running into some roadblocks. Like it seems to be getting stale and it's repetitive, which makes me want to fall off, or engagement's going to fall off. And instead of nominating people in to these activities, I'm kind of like forced. I'm driving them to it. Like you have to do all these things. Or I might be at the front end, and it's just, you guys can layer in your stories where you think to be most effective. Is like, I was put in charge of this and I don't even know where to start. Like, where do I even start? So I'd love to hear, I mean, you can linger on wherever the client work that you're doing makes the most sense, whether it's some of the ones further down the road and so there's more complex challenges to keep the ball rolling? Or for somebody who's new and starting out and they're listening to this, how might one of you help me, or what might I do there? So Patrick, you want to lead off and we can do the round robin?
I think if I got your question right, is kind of how do you get this momentum in an organization to want to grow and develop? I'm a believer, and the counsel I give a client would be, they don't follow a leader, they follow the first follower. So who is your thought leader in the organization that can be sort of your advocate? So can we start with that team? Maybe it's the operations team. You've got a very proactive leader. Let's start in operations, because what will happen is that word will spread to other groups, and suddenly they're coming to you saying, how do I get a bit of that? How do I get my team involved in that? So they're coming to you rather than having to you go out and force it on people that don't understand or have the desire to do it. So usually in an organization, one of those verticals, you'll have some leader that believes in it, wants to grow their talent, and they're going to help you steward it right along.
Excellent. And I guess a follow-up question on that, Patrick, is, if we linger on this for a second, is, okay, that person leans in, that's your champion. Everyone's probably nodding, like, I already have my champion. What might I be measuring or drawing from that division or group that's going to give me the compelling case? What are the type of things that you've seen?
You'll see that they start creating this common language. This is what we're always trying to develop in an organization. Like Mandy, I think you mentioned navigating change. Like, suddenly there are some change models because everybody's going through a new change, and oh boy, operations, they have a model and some exercises they're doing with their teams. They're actually getting earlier adoption. So that spreads very quickly. Is like, can you share that model with me? Which is what we want. Best way to learn something is to teach it to somebody else. I would say that usually what it boils down to is like some model or thing that we've taught them starts just permeating across the organization.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Kai, did you have your finger? And then Mandy.
Yeah, I was just gonna, I think if I'm kind of hovering above this conversation when we are the nerds that we are, and we're like, the model, it's a model. It sounds like maybe something that's not, complex, and just what's that going to do for us, that model? But I think we all have so many examples of when you can, Brian James, I think, always says,
That's our president.
That's our president. You got to name it to tame it. And I recently, I was doing a predictive index session with a client, and we started talking about change and, getting really into some of the challenges they were facing. And I was like, somebody give me a marker. Can I draw an implementation dip for you? And we talked through the implementation dip model. And they have written me, 2 different people have written me notes saying, we are using that implementation dip has caught fire in this organization. We are using it. I'm drawing it. She's like, I'm about to put it in the bathroom stall. She, once you, it's a keeper. Once you have that language, you can use it to talk through the real challenges in your organization. So at the highest level, Patrick, you said it, at the highest level, what we're always trying to do is build common language. And you do that through practice, and if you fall off, you got to come back on and practice harder, It's a big part of what we do, whether it's PI or EQ or, leader capabilities, whatever it is.
Excellent. Mandy, you had your hand up, and then back to Tyler.
Yeah, I think building a common language is in service of building common behaviors.
Yeah.
Common behaviors are what create the culture. It's repeated behaviors and underlying mindsets. So those models serve as such wonderful, we build them throughout the course of our journeys, but they're also nice content snacks. They can stand alone and, feed a team for a short amount of time, like the implementation.
Leadership trail mix.
You get a snack. You get a snack. Here's your model. Orange slice. Chew on this until you're ready for the real thing. I would just add to your question about where might someone begin? Data. Data, we always say, is a catalyst for individual and organizational change. And if you're working in the absence of data, it's a little rudderless. It feels super subjective. Well, I think this. Well, I felt like that. Well, when I talked to Kathy on Tuesday, she said da, da, da. And everyone's left up to their own subjective interpretations of what the heck's going on. So anytime we get started and somebody is new to working with us, I think we do a really good job at ADVISA of making sure that our work is rooted first in an objective data set that is validated and that is stable over time, and it's not like a BuzzFeed quiz or what kind of animal are you, but is real science and helps them see themselves clearly, whether that's themselves individually from a personality perspective or an emotional intelligence perspective, or if that's their culture, their organization, their engagement, their employee experience, the behaviors on display from their leaders. Those things all matter, and they can all be measured correctly and safely and scientifically and anonymously. And we do that work to get folks started. And oftentimes in organizations where they've never done this kind of work, I think having that objective data set is a really nice way for a group of very technical leaders to lock arms. And that way, we're all we're the same starting line, and it's facts. It's like, this is what your people said. And we get to scooch aside all of the emotional riffing and banter that has sort of gotten
when it connects back to the business. Why do we keep talking about the financial performance? Why do we keep talking? Because it's hard evidence based. It's true, and it's what the person whose name is on the front of my paycheck keeps talking to me about. So when you talk about models, you talk about language, you talk about like the leaders, it's just bringing awareness to that, but it has to start with the compelling case and what's already compelling for the leaders is what I'm hearing is what you have to tack this to, or else it's going to live in its own silo in the corner. Tyler, you had a follow-up before. I don't know if you still have it.
Yeah, I mean, actually, it's perfect to what you were saying, Mandy. I just think what I'm thinking about as you say that is assumption is a culture killer. Like when I just see what you do and I don't know where it's coming from or why you're doing it, and I just make an assumption about what's motivating that, like those assumptions then become our realities, our stories. And the reason the shared language and the data cuts through that is because it lets me actually know what's going on, really, not just the story I told myself that I walked out with. We had a conversation just this morning here at CultureCon with a group in a breakout, and we were talking through some of these norms. And one of the ones that came up was this phrase of setting unrealistic goals. And as we talked through it as a group, a lot of the group, it was clear what they kind of saw and heard in their mind's eye when they saw that phrase of setting unrealistic goals was setting unattainable goals. And as I thought about that after the session, it was like, oh, well, if you're watching me strive for a goal that you've interpreted as unattainable, that you're going to make an assumption about, well, what the heck is he doing, right? Like, why is he wasting his time? But if we flip that and say, oh, no, Tyler's actually trying to achieve an unrealistic goal, well, there are a lot of people who might hear that as extremely optimistic, right? As a positive. If we don't have the shared language, if we're using the same word but thinking of it differently, then that vastly shapes the way we interact and the outcomes, right? And so I think that's where the data cuts through those assumptions in a way that gives us that clear shared lens and language to work together.
Excellent. So here's where I want to take this next. So I'm listening. I'm like, great. I'm following you. I'm starting to hear some things that might resonate with me and what I'm experiencing right now. What I'd love for you all to think about, and whoever wants to start can, because I'm putting you on the spot right here. Tell me a story about one of your clients. One of these from to examples of how this actually worked. Obviously we don't have 2 hours, so we don't have to go into too many nitty gritty, but can you share with me how this actually went down? If your clients have already given you the thumbs up, hey, share our story, we're fine with it, great. If not, if you can kind of just frame what type of client it was so that if I'm listening, I kind of know the landscape that we're in. And then where did we find them? And where are they now at whatever stage of their journey they're in? So whoever, show of hands if anybody wants to.
Yeah.
All right, let's hear Rachel.
I'll start pretty surface level. So I'm just going to zoom in. When I came on board, I had the opportunity to be a part of an organization that was a client who was training several of their leaders through our leadership journeys. And it seems so simple, but this was very transformative for this organization. This was their first time that they implemented one-to-ones. And it was organization wide. They decided to adopt it as a part of this leadership development. And upon graduation, so we had gone through several months of training with all of these leaders. I believe it was like, about 80 leaders were going through this same training. So they had this shared language. There were tears at every graduation. We had 3 different graduations. And one of the leaders stood up and, with the permission of their report, had shared that they'd been really frustrated with a particular employee, and it was the first time they'd sat down and actually had a one-to-one that was curated, where there was intentional conversation about that employee and what they were going through. And they learned a lot about just personal struggles that were a part of their life. And they actually co-created a way to kind of rise above those challenges and bring their best self to work. And I mean, there was probably not a dry eye in that graduation. And to me, that's what it's about. It's about actually learning who our people are and seeing them for their whole self that they bring to work. And that was transformative for the organization and for myself to watch that happen.
Excellent. What type of business was it, and how large?
Manufacturing, about 700 to 800 employees.
Great. Thank you.
This one is an interesting example that I'm going to use because we're kind of in it now. I don't have like the from to in terms of the end results, because to be determined,
Great.
But I will say, I think it's a big part of the work that we do. Like when you come on at ADVISA, you read this book called Getting Naked about how to do this type of consulting where you really come with no agenda. You just listen to your clients or potential clients and the challenges that they're bringing up, and you help them solve those challenges. You come alongside them. So this potential client came to me and was very PI, predictive index focused. Like, hey, we've heard of this predictive index thing. We want to, try this out. Give us a demo. Do the little show, and that conversation really evolved into, I just kept like digging and digging. It evolved into a conversation about really are leaders equipped and ready to lead, because there was a lot of succession planning happening and retirements. And the answer was no. So then they were like, okay, we'll do kind of mid-level managers. Let's get these mid-level managers skilled up and let's get them ready to go. And then I was like, okay, great, but let's hold on a little longer. And we talk about activation from above. So I started to dig into, are the highest level leaders, are what we call culture leaders, are they aligned, and are they ready to really speak that common language with those managers that they feel need to go through the trainings? And the answer was definitely no. New CEO, somewhat new, who is it's a family-run business, taking over from his uncle. And, there was just this very clear need for activation from above. So we designed a big journey for them to do a leadership academy and then leadership fundamentals simultaneously. And now we've just started that, and we are in the coaching phase. And even just with that, the first couple of one-on-one coaching sessions, there's so much good already coming out that they never would have talked about until they had this intervention. And to think that this just started with like a, hey, show me predictive index kind of conversation.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, they're still going to do predictive index. That's going to be part of it because data about people. But that activation from above is really what we find can be lacking and is super important.
Good call out, Kai. Patrick, it looks like he's got a story here. Yeah. Thank you, Kai.
Maybe dovetail on that. Kai, I'm going to take you 2 years ahead where you're going.
All right, here we go.
That one, yeah. So we got a manufacturing client, same thing. It's an international, but some of the U.S. facilities, and they can all do their own thing, essentially. So it's getting the culture across the globe is going to be too hard. But one entity started with that executive sponsorship, that activation from above, realizing they had to do it. And when we started our Leadership Academy, there were 3 people that did not want to be there. And that can be a real challenge. But by the end of that journey, they're our biggest advocates. Fast forward 3 years later, those leaders are the ones that engage in coaching still ongoing. They are the ones that want to do this. And it literally is amazing how people have that trust and shared purpose. Suddenly everybody in the organization says, if those leaders are invested in this, I need to be invested in this. And it's cascaded through the whole organization. Now it's a coveted position to get in the next level or next round of cohorts every year because of that executive sponsorship and that trust and shared purpose that, hey, anybody in this particular entity, if you want to grow and matriculate, you've got to grow and have that growth mindset ongoing.
Excellent. Thanks. We're about to land the plane, so I want to hear from Mandy and Tyler at least one more time here with a story that you might have before we wrap up.
So many stories. I love the ones where we've got a client that has worked with us for a really long time in a certain capacity. Like, our leaders don't delegate. Come in and give us a workshop on delegation. And then nobody starts delegating.
By the way,
after
Mandy's
a
clients all
workshop.
talk like that. That's what they sound like.
Great voice.
Sometimes I talk like this.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Come talk about delegation. But we talk a lot about transformation over training and how we are not trainer-tainers. That is not our job at ADVISA. And we all know you can't go to a 2-hour workshop and pop out with any new behaviors. I wish. But as adults, it's really hard for us to change our behavior. You need practice and environment, support, and people, etc. So I love when we've had a client for a long time and they've been trying to leverage our expertise in these onesie-twosie ways that their executive team will tolerate. And we're saying it's not working, but just as long as we agree that this is going to give them knowledge, but not any behavior change. And then one day they come and say, we get it. Let's do the real thing. Let's actually do the hard work. And they zoom back out and realize, yeah, what got us here won't get us there. We're going somewhere new. We need to redefine where we're headed. We need to diagnose where we are. We need to build a new bridge. And that's going to take a ton of time, like years, 3 years, 5 years, 9 years time to get hundreds of humans equipped. And we have so many stories like that. And that's a thrill, I think, every year to be able to look back and see the hundreds, thousands of leaders that we've been able to train and develop because somebody in that organization started advocating for the critical role that people play in helping them thrive.
Thank you, Mandy. And also as we pass the baton back to Tyler here in a second, you might have a comment too there, Kai, is what's not to be lost too, if you're listening to this, is the trail of tears of clients that do stop or they do stick with it and they kind of acquiesce to this is what it is and here's our training budget and it's just this like low tactical level and it's just disembodied or disconnected, that those are always bummers for us. And in my role as a leadership consultant for 15 years, I always remember I felt terrible that I'm like, we couldn't get over the hump to get that activation from, we couldn't get it to that level. And it was just like you were left with good enough. And it's just a bummer because that's not, like you said, it's not trainer-tainment. We're here for a result. So, Kai, do you have a comment before it goes to?
Yes, as I pass it to Tyler, I'll just
keep talking.
Really quick. I was just going to add on to that move from trainer-tainment or just like those quick one-off trainings, those lunch and learns, as we're often asked to do, to that transformational work. It often, I don't know about always, but I'd say most of the time requires the CEO, like the real buy-in. If your CEO, top level leaders are not able to describe the why of this investment, it's not going to go very far. I heard a question in one of the sessions today that's like, what if your CEO is just not on board with the work you're trying to do? And I'm like, well, good luck to you, ma'am, because somehow you got to get that CEO on board, because it's required for people to say, like, this is why we're doing this. This is why I'm giving up my work for one full day a month to go into these sessions and learn and connect with my colleagues. You have to have that from the top level leader.
Thank you for putting that fine point on. Tyler, last but not least, my friend, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's a whole lot for me to add on that. That was fantastic. So I'll just turn this thing
Yeah, let's
off.
hear about a client. If you have a story, one of your like from to or.
Actually, BJ, what you said a minute ago about the kind of painful moments where like it feels like it's not working, I think that's kind of like maybe just a really big gift and opportunity for, I think, all of us, where like you do get into that spot sometimes where you have a conversation or you hear something back from a client or a leader you're working with and it feels like it's not going the way you thought. And I think it's important, like, I think one of the gifts of our roles is like we don't have all the answers. Like we don't get to just like show up and say, hey, just do this easy thing and it'll be done, right? sometimes we think we know how we can affect positive change, and we do know a lot, but sometimes we end up in a spot where we just have questions too, right? And I think the beauty of what we get to do at ADVISA with our clients is that we get to be in there with them, right? So it's like when it doesn't go well, I am feeling that as much as they are in a lot of cases, right? I'm staying up at night thinking about what I could have done differently or what we could do differently the same way I think they are, right? And I think at the end of the day, that's why we all probably do what we do, right? Because then when you do break through and you figure it out, you've done it together in a way that's just ultimately incredibly satisfying for all of us, and just super, super rewarding.
Thank you, Tyler. Thanks to everybody for taking some time out to do this. Hopefully, if you're listening to this, you're welcome. If you're listening to this, hopefully you got a bunch of nuggets. You got to meet some of our crew that's out. Like, how does ADVISA do the work? Who does the work? Here they are. These are the folks that lead the charge of our larger team of specialists that comes out and does this type of work that creates this kind of change. So if you're sitting here thinking, I want to take a first step, I might not want to meet with anybody, I want to take a first step, I encourage you, go to advisa.com and do the 5-minute culture check. Go through it, start with data, like Mandy shared earlier, on your own organization. It is free. It's about 20 questions, and you get immediate results on some areas that you might want to start to maybe facilitate the start of that conversation internally. So advisa.com, takes 5 minutes, culture check, do it. Alongside my consultants, wonderful consultants, ADVISA, I'm BJ McKay, and see if they remember this. And culture
starts here.
We didn't rehearse that.
Get lucky sometimes.
You want us to beatbox?
Yeah. Does he just smile for 10 minutes at the end? Is that how it works?
No, we're done.
Oh, okay.
That's a wrap on this episode of the official CultureCon podcast.
If you got something out of it, share it with a friend, a teammate, or a fellow culture geek.
And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode.
And if you want more ways to stay connected and inspired, check out our upcoming events page for a full listing of webinars, workshops, and conferences.
You'll find the link in the show notes, and we'd love to welcome you to a CultureCon event soon.
Until next time,